Welcome to today's Explainer. Today we're exploring a concept that honestly sounds like, well, a cheesy martial arts movie trope, but it's actually deeply rooted in hard science and human psychology. We're looking at how our perceived vulnerabilities, the very things we think hold us back the most, can literally be transformed into our ultimate weapons. So we'll be diving into an absolutely incredible true story, unpacking the actual science behind mental resilience, and figuring out exactly how we can turn a massive weakness into an unstoppable strength. Let's get right into it.
So, can your greatest vulnerability really become your ultimate weapon? Let's kick things off with a story that hits the nail right on the head. It's this incredibly inspiring tale of a 10-year-old boy. Tragically, this kid lost his left arm in a devastating car accident. Now, for most people, right, that kind of physical loss would mean the total end of any athletic dreams. But this boy, he made a completely surprising decision. Despite missing his left arm, he decided he wanted to study Judo. And if you know Judo, you know it is a highly physical, incredibly grip-heavy martial art.
So his journey begins with this old, highly respected Japanese judo master. The boy is doing well, but there's this huge catch that just leads to immense frustration. For months and months, while he's watching all the other students learn dozens of different flashy techniques, his sensei teaches him only one single throw. Just one. Day in and day out, he practices literally nothing but this single technique. I mean, you can imagine the sheer absurdity he must have felt, right? Doing the exact same move thousands of times while everyone else is moving on. But despite his confusion, he completely trusts his stubborn sensei. And after several months of this relentless, repetitive training, his master enters him into his very first tournament, the state championship. Whenever the boy had questioned this bizarre training regimen, his master just kept saying, just focus on this one throw. Keep practicing. And you know what? Incredibly, that relentless focus actually pays off. To his own absolute amazement, the boy easily wins his first match using his one and only technique. Then, he wins his second match. The third match is a little bit tougher, but when his opponent gets impatient and charges, boom, the boy deftly uses his single move to win again. Suddenly, this one-armed boy who only knows a single throw finds himself in the terrifying final match of the tournament. And his opponent? Oh, just a bigger, stronger, much more experienced athlete who happens to have won the whole tournament for 3 straight years. Get this. The organizers are actually so concerned the boy is going to get hurt that they seriously consider stopping the match entirely. But the sensei insists they let him fight. So, the match begins, and the crowd is completely on the edge of their seats. The much larger opponent steps in to grab the boy, and for a terrifying second, it really looks like it's all over. But then, the opponent makes a critical mistake. He drops his guard. Instantly, the boy reaches with his right hand, steps in, and throws the 3-time champion flat on his back. Just like that, the boy has won the match and the entire tournament.
Okay, so picture this. On the car ride home, the adrenaline finally fades, and the boy is just left with this profound sense of confusion. He looks over at his master and asks, "Sensei, how did I win the tournament with only one move?" I mean, he's honestly wondering if it was a setup. Did the judges let him win out of pity because he only had one arm? How on earth could he possibly defeat champions when he only knew a single technique, and they knew hundreds?
The sensei looks at the boy and delivers this massive emotional twist. He says, you won for 2 reasons. First, you've mastered one of the most difficult throws in all of judo. And the second reason, the only known defense for that move is for your opponent to grab your left arm. Wow. Just think about that. The boy's missing left arm wasn't a handicap in that moment. It was actually his greatest tactical advantage. By leaning entirely into the reality of his situation, his biggest weakness had literally become his biggest strength.
Now, this beautiful parable actually perfectly illustrates the real-world science of sports psychology. Because look, turning a weakness into a strength, it doesn't happen by magic. It requires immense mental resilience, or what scientists call mental toughness. Mental toughness isn't just some genetic trait you're luckily born with. It's a collection of values, attitudes, and behaviors that we use to handle tough situations. And crucially, as our sources show, it's built and developed through specific, structured psychological training. It's a muscle you have to work.
See, in a high-stakes judo match, physical skill's absolutely not enough. Researchers actually found that judokas have to make critical tactical decisions under intense pressure in just 100 to 200 milliseconds. You literally can't even blink that fast. When athletes are physically matched, it's the mind that dictates the winner. In fact, research analyzing hundreds of judo athletes reveals that when a competitor achieves a perfectly balanced mental state, it drastically increases their winning chances. We're talking about predicting victory with a massive 71.55% probability. That's a real game changer. So, what exactly is that winning mental state? Well, sports psychologists call it the Iceberg Profile. Jigoro Kano, the founder of Judo, taught this philosophy of maximum efficiency. Basically using your mental and physical energy wisely without wasting it on worry or anger. The Iceberg Profile is the literal scientific validation of that philosophy. It's characterized by this massive peak of vigor, meaning energy, joy, vitality, while keeping all those negative emotions like tension, fatigue, and depression incredibly low. They stay subsurface, right? Just like the bottom of an iceberg. Champions consistently display this specific profile to totally outsmart their opponents.
So the absolute crucial point here is how these athletes process the intense anxiety of competition. Look, everyone gets pre-match jitters. Everyone. But check out this comparison. The data shows that winners handle stress through something called positive reevaluation. They see stressful situations as challenges they can overcome, actually turning that anxiety into a competitive edge. Losers, on the other hand, well, they default to self-blame and wishful thinking, kind of like the one-armed boy, right? Champions don't engage in wishful thinking about having two arms. They positively evaluate the tools they actually do have. Now, in scientific studies, an effect size measures how much of a difference a specific intervention actually makes. To put it in perspective, an effect size over 0.8 is considered huge. Well, a longitudinal study of previously inactive men showed that after just 6 weeks of structured judo training, their psychological resilience improved with an incredible effect size of 1.047. I mean, that is massive. This definitively proves that mental toughness and the ability to reframe weakness is something you can actively train and significantly improve in a very short amount of time.
So, let's take this out of the science lab for a minute and look at some actual historical examples from our sources. These are real individuals who absolutely prove that this mindset creates true champions. People who overcome what most of us would consider to be completely insurmountable odds.
Take the incredible true story of Kapil Parmar. Kapil competes in the J1 classification, which means he is visually impaired. Now, in a sport that is completely reliant on spatial awareness, timing, and balance, lacking sight could so easily be viewed as a devastating weakness. But Kapil, he didn't let that stop him for a second. Relying on his highly developed tactile senses and just immense mental toughness, he made historic waves at the 2024 Paris Paralympics. He won bronze in the 60-kilogram weight class, securing India's first ever Paralympic medal in judo. He literally turned a perceived sensory deficit into this razor-sharp tactical focus. Amazing. And then we have Ebony Drysdale Daley. During the incredibly uncertain period of the COVID-19 pandemic, her Olympic dreams were seriously put in jeopardy. Her training club, which was based in the British Center of Excellence, was heavily restricted. She literally had no dojo to train in while preparing for the highest level of competition in the entire world. But instead of falling into that loser's trap of self-blame or wishful thinking we talked about, she utilized positive reevaluation. She relied on mental flexibility, she accepted exactly what was in front of her, and she totally adapted her routine with alternative plans.
Because she accepted her circumstances and adapted, she didn't just survive that pandemic slump, she made history. Ebony became the first ever Jamaican judoka to qualify for an Olympic Games, proudly wearing her dual heritage flag on the stage in Tokyo 2020. She proved, without a doubt, that the lack of a perfect training environment wasn't an excuse to fail. It was simply an opportunity to out-train her opponents mentally. So, as we wrap up, I want you to genuinely ask yourself right now, what perceived weakness in your own life could be trained into an unstoppable strength? We've seen a young boy use a missing limb as the ultimate defense. We've seen the science of the Iceberg Profile prove that mental reevaluation creates a massive 71% advantage. And we've seen athletes like Kapil and Ebony shatter glass ceilings by completely refusing to be defined by their limitations. The science shows that resilience is highly trainable. So take these lessons, step onto the mat of your own life, and find a way to flip your vulnerabilities into your greatest victories. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope you leave feeling as inspired as I am.